All right. So, what can you learn in 21 minutes? We're about to find out. Hi, I'm Kiki L'Italienne, and this is 21 in 21, 21 in 21 Talks, where the invited speakers are encouraged to share their 21-minute talks about all kinds of things, from beer brewing to building a business, you name it. They're talking about it. And this series consists of 21 talks, 21 minutes long, all taking place, and you guessed it, 2021. Speakers can choose to use slides. They can choose to forgo them completely. As long as they don't go over their 21 minutes, the floor is theirs. So all talks can be watched live or as replays on Association Chat on the YouTube channel. And I am so glad that you're here. Okay, so for this special 21 in 21 talk, we are featuring Bruce Rosenthal. I'm going to tell you a little bit about Bruce and then bring him up for his talk. Bruce Rosenthal has advanced corporate partnership programs for over 20 years. He's a strategic advisor, consultant, and an educator to associations and not-for-profit organizations. He creates corporate partnership programs that increase revenue, add membership constituent value, and foster sustainability. He demonstrates leadership in identifying and cultivating sponsorship and partnership best practices, opportunities, and solutions as convener of the Partnership Professionals Network, PPN, a national sponsorship partnership organization. All right. So today, Bruce is going to be talking about creating an association business model for high-value corporate sponsorships. All righty then. Okay, Bruce, thank you so much, and take it away.
Thanks, Kiki. Let me just go into the screen share thing. All right, 1 second here. Let me try it again.
I'm back, Bruce, just in case you need me.
Share a screen. Share a screen. Screen sharing tips. Share a screen. Okay, I'm clicking on share. Share entire screen.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, it says Chrome has lost permission to share your screen. Follow these steps.
All right. So as Bruce is going through and figuring out how to allow Chrome to go ahead and do that, I'm going to say just one more thing quickly about this topic, and about Bruce, and that is that Bruce is really well known in the association space. If you're watching this, then it's probably because you already know that. You know Bruce somehow, or you've seen his work. This particular topic is of great interest to me because when I saw that he was talking about not just looking at the way that you're addressing sponsorship and corporate sponsorship specifically, but also looking at the question of what is an association and what does it mean when you have an association, and you start asking your question about the tax status, and how that really isn't just the business model. So I was really encouraged by the fact that we were going to hear from him today. And so, Bruce, how's it going?
Well, we're in a kind of a loop here with going through system preferences, and we may have to do this without everybody seeing the slides, unfortunately, but we will make it work either way.
All right.
So let me get out of this and yep, unfortunately there was multiple settings that needed to be reset. So if it's okay, we will do this without slides.
All right. I'm good if you're good. You want me to jump off? All right.
Good. All right, welcome everybody. As Kiki said, thanks again to Kiki and to Association Chat. We are going to talk about creating association business model for high-value sponsorship programs. As Kiki said, my background, I've been involved in corporate partnerships for years. And interestingly, about 12 years ago, I was asked by the CEO of the association where I worked at the time to be vice president of corporate partnerships and manage this major new corporate partnership program that the association had just launched and put together. Interestingly, that was the fall of 2008, just as the economy crashed. And I knew that we were going to have corporate partners, some architects, banks, who were going to get no new business from our members for the next few years. So I began this path of beginning to reassess corporate partner programs and the value proposition and figure out ways to make them successful. So in the last 5 or so years, as I've been a consultant, I've been working with a variety of associations, and also, as Kiki mentioned, through the Partnership Professionals Network, to learn more about what works, what doesn't work, what some of the challenges are. And the challenges are many for those of us who have worked within associations on their sponsorship programs. In fact, somebody who has been at many of the Partnership Professionals Network meetings over the years said that they are half best practices and half therapy for those who just want some sense of camaraderie around corporate partnership programs. So this presentation is going to be a little different than others that you might have heard and others that I have done, where I often talk about sponsor benefits and fees and fulfilling benefits and prospecting for corporate partners and fulfillment reports and all of that. Today, we're going to talk more about the why and the how of creating this association business model for corporate partnerships. And I use a lot of analogies, and I use a lot of analogies relating to restaurants, which is a little bit challenging now since the restaurants are not all open to the fullest extent. But this is really around the idea of developing a business model for our restaurant, so to speak, instead of kind of tweaking the menu. And I know that I often get calls from associations that are saying, Bruce, can you come in and help us with our sponsorship program? We really want to increase the revenue. We're losing sponsors. We need a better program. Could you take our prospectus and edit it for us and make some recommendations and changes? And I know that that's really not going to be effective. We really, using this restaurant analogy, need to think through what is the business model, what is the customer base, is the customer base changing? What do we need to do to make this restaurant successful before we begin modifying the menu and ordering the dishes and the silverware for the new restaurant model? So the reason that I think we need this business model for associations, it's using a line that I know many of us have heard previously, that not-for-profit is a tax status, not a business model. And I think a lot of us in associations have fallen back on, oh, we're a not-for-profit. We can't really have business relationships with companies because we're a not-for-profit. You know, in reality, this is, so actually sponsorships in most cases don't even have tax implications. This is not a major change in the way that associations operate. And I'm not giving legal advice, but in most cases, unless you're really endorsing a company's product or saying, go to this sponsor company's catalog, page 37, and order their widget, it's not a taxable event, and it's not changing the not-for-profit status of the association. And I know in years ago when I had worked for that association and was promoted to that role of VP of Corporate Partnerships, one of the association VPs on staff came up to me and said, well, Bruce, I guess congratulations, but you've gone to the dark side. Our association really should not be involved in these sorts of business relationships and promoting companies. But I think, you know, this is a business model that's very much in alignment with the role of associations. And with the big qualifier that mission always comes first in any sponsorship relationship, and the members come second. And we always need to remember first the mission of the association, the integrity of the association, and then the needs of the members. And then everything else falls after that regarding sponsorships. And there's a way to make that a win-win-win for everybody. From the company's standpoint, in almost every case, corporate sponsorships are a marketing business expense. They are not philanthropy. And whether a company is making a philanthropic contribution or any of us as an individual, that's a very different decision than a marketing expense. And a marketing expense is driven more by business need and ROI, where philanthropy is, oh, it's the right thing to do, or my company or I as an individual was touched by the work that charity does. These are business expenses for companies, so there needs to be a business model around that expense. So a little more on this association business model for the association itself. So just from a basic business standpoint, associations need more revenue and members need more content. And if anything, with the pandemic, associations need even more revenue, and companies need, and members need more content, not only because of the impact of the pandemic, but there are a whole range of global issues, environmental issues affecting members, economic issues, diversity and inclusion issues. Things have become much more complicated. Members need more and more content on a wider and wider range of topics. And associations are facing a range of obstacles. And I saw a couple reports recently that I'll cite some data from. There was a report called the Association Economic Outlook report that came out recently from Marketing General Incorporated. And they revealed responses to a question in their survey: what obstacles will affect how quickly your association can react to the economic recession and the pandemic? What obstacles do you face? 53% of the association execs responding said revenue to provide information to members was an obstacle. 53%. And another 50% said personnel on their association staff to develop programs for members was an obstacle. And 34% said they don't have the expertise to launch programs for new events, and other information to help their members. So we have a third to half of the associations responding saying that they lack the revenue, the personnel, and the expertise to meet the needs of their members today and moving forward coming out of the pandemic. And associations also face competition. So there was a report that came out recently called Looking Forward 2021 from Association Laboratory that had responses to a question about sources of competition for associations. Who is your competition as an association? And over 1/3 said that other national associations are their competition. And another 25% said state and local associations are their competition. And fully a quarter said that for-profit organizations are their competition. So here we have a quarter to a third of the associations responding to the questions about competition, saying they have legitimate competition from other associations and the for-profit sector. And the other big type of competition that I've been talking about for a number of years pre-pandemic is the impact of technology. So we have kind of the big three: Google, social media, and Zoom. And Kiki and I were talking about this before we got started a little while ago, that, it used to be when I was working with an association 6, 8, 10 years ago, if a company came to us and wanted to reach our members, we said, first of all, you can't have the list of members or conference attendees unless you're a top level sponsor and unless you come through our association. And secondly, you can't educate our members unless we find a way to get you to participate at our conferences, because our members primarily learn at conferences. And what has changed in the last 6 or 8 years, and particularly in the last year due to the pandemic, is members can now find a whole range of content via Google. Companies can find association members through social media and being creative in the use of LinkedIn and other social media to capture the names of members. And now that we are also comfortable on Zoom, we may not all like it all the time, but now that we're comfortable using Zoom, all of a sudden this big differentiator of, oh, our association holds in-person conferences, you have to come to our conference, is no longer valid. So a company can put out very good educational tutorials, and educational demos of its products and services and seminars and even conferences, all on Zoom, and find the members of the association through social media, and then further get the word out with Google searches so members can find that. So all of a sudden we have this whole range of competition from other associations, from the for-profit sector, and technology competing with associations. So why do we need this business model for companies? Well, the first thing is, as I said, companies are almost always paying for sponsorships as a business expense, as a marketing expense. When I look at years ago, when I looked at the checks that came in from sponsors, that it was always from the marketing department. Companies need ROI. They need return on investment. So I think it's always important for associations to know, for each of your top level corporate partners, what is their return on investment? How do they measure that? If it's in terms of sales, how many sales do they need? So I used to work for an association that had a number of banks as corporate partners. And one of the banks said, if we finance one building at one of your member companies, that will pay for our $160,000 sponsorship right there. So we need to find a way through this sponsorship, through whatever benefits that we get, to make at least one sale, one financing with your members per year. And we also, excuse me, we also had a marketing agency that was a sponsor, and I knew they were going to have to sell a whole lot of website redesigns and brochure productions to pay for that sponsorship. So useful to know whether you know it, whether you have a group purchasing program and you kind of know what the data is on what companies make for each sale with your members. Or you can ask them. And I've had a couple companies, they said, well, you need to sign a non-disclosure agreement if we're going to talk about our ROI. And I said, fine, be glad to sign a non-disclosure, because the more I would know as a sponsorship manager about how they define success in terms of ROI, the easier it is for me to put together a program that will be successful for them. And because of that ROI factor and the fact that this is a marketing expense, companies have a whole range of ways that they can invest in marketing and achieving that ROI. So companies have choices. They can do ad campaigns, they can use social media, they can do a roadshow, and especially since a lot of our associations are not having in-person conferences last year and some not this year, companies are finding other ways. And I've talked to companies that sell large equipment, and they are doing their own roadshows now, and since they don't have an association in-person expo to go to. So companies, I will always say, prefer the value of affinity, prefer to sponsor an association and work with an association. But if an association can't produce that ROI, companies will go elsewhere. And going back to when I worked at that association, and we were challenged by the factors relating to the economy, and now I hired consultants to interview our corporate partners. And now as a consultant, I interview corporate partners for clients, and these are confidential one-on-one interviews. So companies say whatever is on their mind. And I'll hear things from companies like, what I often hear now is that they don't want to sponsor just the conference. That if they are going to have a successful business model for sponsorship, as one company said, what about the other 360 days of the year? Or the flip side of that, a company that said to me, we market 365 days a year. How does the 3-day conference, even with a little add-on in promotion or social media before or after the conference, how does that really help us? And other companies who said, gee, we're looking for a year-round relationship, not just a few days of the conference. And companies that have really drilled down on this, and there was one company that said to me, at the association's conference, only 9% of the attendees are of interest to our company. And I thought it was interesting that they said 9%. They didn't say about 10%. They didn't say, 1 out of 10. They had this down to a science. They had already determined, based on looking at registration lists and such, that only 9% of the people at that conference were of interest to them, and conversely, 91% were not of interest to them. And it reminded me that a number of years ago when I worked at the association, we had a big conference, very successful conference, and the last day of the conference, one of our top tier sponsors came to me and said, we're dropping our sponsorship. And I'm like, what happened? We had this big conference. We had the expo was open, 4,000 members in the expo for 3 days. And he said, well, Bruce, based on what we sell, we wanted to reach 400 of your members. We couldn't find the 400 out of the 4,000. So I'm trying to think of a way to salvage the sponsorship. And I said, oh, so if we target those 400, if we find out where they are, if we align them with metropolitan areas, this was obviously pre-pandemic, if we align them with metropolitan areas, if we hold lunch and learns for you to come in and meet some of those folks around the table face to face, and you can do a short presentation to them, educational presentation. And I couldn't finish the sentence before he said, we'll be there. If we can meet 60 of your members of our target audience in those forums, those lunch and learns in 3 cities around the country, we will be there to meet those 60 folks. That is more valuable than the 4,000 members in that expo. So the other things I hear from companies is that they really, truly want to seek alignment with the association. And they'll make comments like, we want a partnership that is beneficial to our company and the association. We won't just write a check to get our name on something or to get our logo placed on something. We want to align our goals, so we want to do it together. Companies that say they're looking for synergy with their corporate goals. Companies that say we actually want to meet more often with the association staff. We really want to know what's going on with members. If the association does surveys, we'd like to talk about the survey results. What are the pain points that members are feeling? If the association does a survey after the conference, a virtual or in-person or hybrid conference, we want to know what's on members' minds. And that sort of alignment can either be what I call kind of hard alignment or soft alignment. And it can either be somehow direct connections to members, like those lunch and learns, or something else I did a number of years ago. I worked for an association that went through a name change and had hired a consulting agency to help with the name change. And the consulting agency was going to interview board members, staff, state associations. And they said, well, can they interview the top tier corporate partners also and get their input? So we arranged that to happen. The corporate partners are delighted. And then the day before we officially announced the new name of the association, I called the 10 top corporate partners one by one on the phone. And I said, don't tell anybody, but the new name is going to be announced tomorrow. And the new name is this. And they really felt like insiders and partners with the association. So the other thing that I was going to talk about was, if we're going to have business models, we as associations need to be selling what companies are buying. And there are 4 levels of kind of purchasing affinity. So there's visibility, awareness, attitude, and behavior. So using one of my restaurant analogies again. So most associations are selling visibility. So with my restaurant analogy, so visibility is I drive down Main Street and I see a sign for a restaurant. That's all I know. Visibility, saw something about a new restaurant. Awareness is I see another sign that it's a Mexican restaurant. So I know a little bit more. I'm generally aware of the restaurant, but that's about all. And the third is attitude. So I read a review of the restaurant and I hear that they have really good food. So now I have a positive attitude about the restaurant. And fourth is behavior. I actually order food from the restaurant, either to dine in or now to carry out. So the goal is, or the big leap is, going from visibility, logo, signage, recognition visibility, to changing behavior, changing members' behavior. And that could be purchasing, depending on each company's ROI, and it's going to differ from each company. It could be downloads of a white paper from the company's website. It could be logging into company's website, going to a corporate sponsor's webinar. So however the sponsor company defines ROI in terms of behavior change, that's the big change we want to make, from mere visibility, merely driving by and seeing a sign for a restaurant, to actually going in the restaurant and purchasing food. So one quick test on the visibility scale, and I did this with some folks from the Partnership Professionals Network a few years ago, to take your prospectus with a red pen and cross off anything that says visibility, recognition, acknowledgement, and logo placement, and see what's left in your prospectus for your top tier sponsors. And we found that in many associations, the only thing that was left was the 45-minute reception with the board at the conference. Or some other relatively modest benefit. And then you think we're going to charge for a conference sponsorship $10,000, $20,000, $50,000 for a sponsorship, when most of those benefits are the low-level visibility benefits that are a big stretch from what the companies are looking for in terms of changing behavior. So the goal here is really for associations to really act and sell like a marketing agency. to really position, and if any of you have ever had the experience of going to a marketing agency where they don't have gold, silver, bronze packages of benefits, they customize services. And what marketing agencies bring to the table, I think associations can exceed what marketing agencies bring to the table. So associations have an audience, and associations have a database. So you can take that audience, and back to the example I mentioned earlier of taking an audience of prospective customers of a company and dividing that up by metropolitan area and inviting them to lunch and learns, you can slice and dice and divide that database in whatever way works best for a company. Always, again, in alignment with your mission and the needs of your members. Associations have a whole range of communications channels. There are e-newsletters, magazines, websites, social media, listservs, conferences, webinars, and there are a whole range of what I call communications forums, board meetings that sponsors can participate in, committees and task forces, focus groups that corporate sponsors can lead. So the advantage that associations have, those are the same sorts of audiences and communications channels and communications forums that marketing agencies offer, but marketing agencies have to go out and find those channels and those forums and those audiences. Associations already have the audiences. So it's a great way for associations to really develop those packages and in fact offer more than a marketing agency would and for more value. And I think if we flip this around, if any of us with an association were going out and talking to a consulting firm about helping us with our association's membership program to increase membership renewals and improve membership prospecting, you wouldn't think of a company saying, well, we can sell you a gold, silver, bronze package. It would all be customized. So how are we going to implement this business model and customize year-long sponsorships for companies? So here are kind of 7 quick steps. Well, there's 7 steps. They're not necessarily quick, but 7 steps which are different than mailing out a prospectus to companies. And let me start by saying, what I'm going to talk about here can be tiered and scaled, can be scaled for any association. So if your job is includes 5 function areas or 4 function areas, marketing and exhibit booths and sponsorships, you can do this sort of outreach with a couple companies. If you've got a larger sponsorship partnership business development department with several staff, you can reach out to 10 or 12 or 15 companies. But the first step is to ask companies about their goals and their objectives, not their marketing tactics. We don't want to get to tactics yet. Do they want to co-brand something? Do they want their name on a website? Talk about goals and objectives. And then ask follow-up questions. As much of a deep dive as you can do so you thoroughly know what the company's goals and objectives are. And then you want to go back, thank them for their time. Don't offer anything at that point because you don't want to jump the gun and offer them something they don't want. Find out how they define success. Go back to your office, talk to your virtual office, talk to your colleagues, and develop a proposal brief. And this can be a 1 or 2 page document. You want to summarize the company's goals and objectives as you heard them. Align those goals and objectives with your needs, your association's needs, your members' needs. And this is where we get out of the challenge of what if a company asks for something really bizarre that we can't do. They're not asking for any benefits. They're not asking for any tactics. You are going to determine that on your own. And then you're going to kind of define those in terms of services and benefits. And then you're going to go back to the company with this draft as a Word document and review it with them and ask them, did you get it right? Do we need to tweak it? Did I understand what you were saying about your goals and objectives? How do these benefits sound? Do these fulfill your goals? And chances are it's not been a home run. They're going to suggest some changes, which is great. It begins to build that relationship and that partnership. And then with those changes, you'll develop a fuller proposal that will have fees in it, that will have a timeline on it, a place for signatures, and you'll go back to them again with this as a almost final draft. Did I get it right? Did this work for you? Do we have any changes? Do we have a deal? And this is very much, like a marketing agency approach of finding out what the client needs, finding out what their pain points are, delivering a package, and then fulfilling it like a marketing agency with an account exec on staff to kind of walk the company through this process for the year. So that, I think, is really the business model that we should all be seeking, that will fulfill the needs of both the association from a sponsorship standpoint and the companies from a sponsorship standpoint. Kiki, back to you.
This was absolutely incredible, Bruce. I have to say, thank you so much for jumping on and doing this 21 and 21. How do you feel?
Very good. Thank you. Thanks for the opportunity.
I really appreciate it. And, I have to say that, whenever there's technical difficulties, you can always tell someone who's a real pro when they're able to just keep going no matter what. So, you know what? No slides, no problem. Bruce just kept going on with it. And for that, I have to say kudos to Bruce for being able to communicate all of this great information. And kudos to all of you for listening and learning. When you look at something like a program like 21 and 21, and you think, what can I grab that's going to be truly valuable that I'll be able to apply and use in my day to day? This is some really great information that I think all of us can learn from. And especially if you're working with sponsors, if you are a sponsor, an advertiser, an exhibitor, or if you're on the association side and you're trying to figure out what is it that people are really looking for and how are you going to make them happy. I think Bruce outlined some incredible ways. Go back through, listen to this again, and look for those 7 steps. And as a follow-up to this, I'm going to go ahead and work with Bruce to draft the 7 steps in a little article so that we can post that on associationchat.com. You can go and download that and get your steps, print them out, keep them by your desk, and figure out what it is that you want to do with those so that you're able to take this 21 minutes and really use it to the fullest effect. So, as always, keep asking questions to learn every day. As Joseph Campbell once said, the cave you fear to enter holds the treasure you seek. Have a great rest of the week, everyone.